My report is about Persian literature. Before we discuss Persian literature, know more about Persia. The Persian Empire is the name given to a series of dynasties created in modern-day Iran that spanned several centuries, from the 6th century BC to the 20th century AD. The first Persian Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great around 550 BC, became one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Europe's Balkan Peninsula in the west to India's Indus Valley in the east. This Iron Age dynasty, sometimes called the Achaemenid Empire, was a global hub of culture, religion, science, art, and technology for more than 200 years before it fell to the invading armies of Alexander the Great. Now, who is Cyrus the Great? The Persian Empire started as a collection of semi-nomadic tribes who raised sheep, goats, and cattle on the Iranian plateau. Cyrus the Great, the leader of such tribe, began to defeat nearby kingdoms including Media, Lydia, and Babylon, joining them under one rule. He found the first Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire, in 550 BC. The first Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great soon became the world's first superpower. It united under one government three important sites of early human civilization in the ancient world: Mesopotamia, Egypt's Nile Valley, and India's Indus Valley. Cyrus the Great is immortalized in the Cyrus cylinder, a clay cylinder inscribed in 539 BC, with the story of how he conquered Babylon from King Nabonidus, bringing an end to the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Darius the Great, the fourth king of the Achaemenid Empire, ruled over the Persian Empire when it was at its largest, stretching from the Caucasus and West Asia to that was then Macedonia, today called Balkans, the Black Sea, Central Asia, and even into Africa, including parts of Libya and Egypt. He unified the empire through introducing standard currency and weights and measures, making Aramaic the official language and building roads. The Behistun inscription, a multilingual relief carved into Mount Behistun in West Iran, extols his virtues and was a critical key to deciphering cuneiform script. Its impact is compared that of the Rosetta Stone, the tablet that enabled scholars to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics. Now, where is Persia? At its height, under Darius the Great, the Persian Empire stretched from Europe's Balkan Peninsula in parts of what is present-day Bulgaria, Romania, and Ukraine, to the Indus River Valley in northwest India and south of Egypt. The Persians were the first people to establish regular routes of communication between three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. They built many new roads and developed the world's first postal service. What we have here is the Persian Empire map. This is an old map that shows us the boundaries of the Persian Empire. Now let's talk about the Persian culture. The ancient Persians of the Achaemenid Empire created art in many forms, including metalwork, rock carvings, weaving, and architecture. As the Persian Empire expanded to encompass other artistic centers of early civilization, a new style was formed with influences from these sources. Early Persian art included large, carved rock reliefs cut into cliffs, such as those found at Nash-e Rostam. an ancient cemetery filled with the tombs of Achaemenid kings. The elaborate rock murals depict equestrian scenes and battle victories. Ancient Persians were also known for their metalwork. In the 1870s, smugglers discovered gold and silver artifacts among ruins near the Oxus River in present-day Tajikistan. The artifacts include a small golden chariot, coins, bracelets decorated in griffon motif. Now, the griffon is a mythical creature with wings and head of an eagle and the body of a lion, and a symbol of the Persian capital of Persepolis. So, if you want to imagine the griffon, you can think of the, the figure of a combined eagle and lion. Now, British diplomats and members of the military serving in Pakistan brought roughly 180 of these gold and silver pieces, known as the Oxus Treasure, to London, where they are now housed at the British Museum. The history of carpet weaving in Persia dates back to the nomadic tribes. The ancient Greeks prized the artistry of these hand-woven rugs, famous for their elaborate design and bright colors. Today, most Persian rugs are made of wool, silk, and cotton. Now, the capital of ancient Iran, or what we call Persia, is Persepolis. The ancient Persian capital city of Persepolis, situated in the southern Iran. It ranks among the world's greatest archaeological sites. It was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. The Achaemenid palaces of Persepolis were built upon a massive terraces. They were decorated with ornamental facades that include the long rock relief carvings for which the ancient Persians were famous. Now, about the Persian religion. Many people think of Persia as synonymous with Islam, though Islam only became the dominant religion in the Persian Empire after the Arab conquests of the 7th century. The first Persian Empire was shaped by a different religion, Zoroastrianism. It was named after the Persian prophet Zoroaster, who was also known as Zarathustra. Zoroastrianism is arguably the world's first monotheistic religion. It's still practiced today as a minority religion in parts of Iran and India. Zoroaster, who likely lived sometime between 1500 and 500 BC, taught followers to worship one god instead of the many deities worshipped by early Indo-Iranian groups. The Achaemenid kings were devout Zoroastrians. By most accounts, Cyrus the Great was a tolerant ruler who allowed his subjects to speak their own languages and practice their own religions. While he ruled by the Zoroastrian law of Asha, which is of truth and righteousness, he didn't impose Zoroastrianism on the people of Persia's conquered territories. Hebrew scriptures praise Cyrus the Great for freeing the Jewish people of Babylon from captivity and allowing them to return to Jerusalem. Subsequent rulers in the Achaemenid Empire followed Cyrus the Great's hands-off approach to social and religious affairs, allowing Persia's diverse citizenry to continue practicing their own ways of life. This period of time is sometimes called the Pax Persica, or Persian peace. Now, what made the Persian Empire fall? The Persian Empire entered a period of decline after a failed invasion of Greece by Xerxes I in 480 BC. The costly defense of Persia's lands depleted the empire's funds, leading to heavier taxation among Persia's subjects. The Achaemenid dynasty finally fell into the invading armies of Alexander the Great of Macedon in 330 BC. Subsequent rulers sought to restore the Persian Empire to to its Achaemenid boundaries, though the empire never quite regained the enormous size it had achieved under Cyrus the Great. Now that we know about the background of old Iran, which is Persia, let's talk more about present day Iran. Now, Iran is the 17th most populous country and the second largest country in the Middle East. It is located south of the Caspian Sea and north of the Persian Gulf. It is a multicultural country and one of the world's oldest civilizations. Its land area is 1,648,195 square kilometers, and as of 2014, their population is about 81,840,713, and they enjoy a life expectancy of around 70 years old. Now, earlier we saw the map of the Persian Empire. Now, what we see here in front of us is the map of the current Iran. So, as we can see, or if we can compare to the previous map, we can see that Iran is smaller than what used to be the Persian Empire. Now, the capital and largest city of Iran is called Tehran, and they're using an Islamic theocracy for their form of government. Their monetary unit is riyal, and for their religion, in 633 AD, they have indigenous faiths of Manichaeism and Zoroastrianism. In 1501, Shiite Islam became the official religion. Now, Iran uses several languages. They have the Khwarezmian language, Mazandarani language, Old Azeri language, and of course the Persian language. Now, for the brief history of Iran, in 1500 BC, they were occupied by Medes and the Persians. In 525 BC, King Cyrus the Great became the ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, who overthrew Medes. In 331 BC, Persia fell to Alexander the Great. In 312 BC, there came the Seleucids. In 247 BC, there were Greek-speaking Parthians who occupied Iran. In 224 BC, we have the Sasanians. In 641, we have the Arab Muslims. On the 12th century, they were invaded by the Mongols. In 1501 to 1722, we have the Safavid dynasty. And finally, for 1794 to 1925, they have the Kahar dynasty. As we can notice, there were a lot of dynasties and people or races that have colonized or have taken over Iran. But at present, they have their own government. Now, for their arts, they retain what they used to have during Persian era of carpet weaving, pottery, mosaic, miniature painting, calligraphy, music, textile design, and illustrated manuscripts. Now let's talk more about the Persian or the Iran literature. When we talk about the Persian literature, it is one of the world's oldest literatures. But not all of the Persian literature is written in Persian language, as some works were written in Arabic and Greek. Not all literature as well was written in Persian is written by Persians or Iranians, as Turkic, Caucasian, and Indic writers also used the Persian language. Main issue of the pre-Islamic culture of the Persian literature was wisdom and a kind of rationalism. So they talk more about wisdom and rationalism. And goodness and evil was a principal issue, and it appeared in books and independent treatises. Now, for Persian literature, their classical Persian poetry is always rhymed. And I have here some types of Persian literature. So, first we have ghost and folk songs. Now, these folk songs are oral traditions. It means that they are passed over by mouth. It is a kind of Iranian minstrels. Next, we have the Qasida or ode. It's a long poem in monorhyme and it's usually panegyric, didactic, or religious in nature. We also have Divan. It is a collection of poets, ghazals, and other verse arranged alphabetically according to rhymes. Now, the ghazal is either an ode or a lyric. It is a poetic form consisting of rhyming couplet and refrain. Poetic expression of both pain of loss or separation and the beauty of love. And usually this is written by Persian mystics and poets. Next we have Masnavi. Masnavi is written in rhyming couplets for heroic, romantic, and narrative verses. So we can compare it to what we have in the English literature, which is an epic. Now, Masnavi is also a poem based on independent, internally rhyming lines, which is following a meter of 11 or occasionally 10. Next, we have the Rubaiyat, a poetry style used to describe Persian quatrain. It contains only 4 lines where all lines rhyme except the third line. So, for example, we have rhyming AABA or AAAA. Now, for the early literature of the Persian Empire, we have Sa'ada and Rumi. They are considered the two poetic geniuses of their time. After them, we have Hamdullah Mustafi. He produced notable works of history, geography, epic, and the Zafarnameh or Book of Victory. Following him was Nasir ud-Din Tusi. He wrote about philosophy and logic. Now, there are 3 stages of development in Persian short story. We have the formative period, where we have prominent authors like Muhammad Ali Hamalzadeh. His first, he is the first writer of modern short stories, collections of Yak-i Budyak-i Nabud, and gained momentum. We also have Sadek Hedayat, who introduced modernism in Persian literature. His masterpieces were Buf-e-Kur and Haji Aka. He also wrote Segatrayekun, or it means 3 drops of blood in English, and Zenda Bigur, or buried alive. Now the next period would be the growth and development period, where we have a prominent author named Halal al-I Ahmad, who shows awareness of the new generation of third world writers concerned with the problems of cultural dominations by colonial powers. And finally, we have the third period, which is the period of diversity. In this period, we have the influence of the Western literature. We also have new and modern approaches in writing, especially in the short stories. And our famous writers for this time was Mehdi Akavanzales, Simin Bebahani, Aref Gazvini, and Shahryar. After talking about the classical or the stages of the short story of Persian literature, let's talk about the classical Persian poetry. We have our famous poet Muhammad Taghi Bahar, which is considered king of poets, and most of the time the theme of his poets was social and political situation of Iran. Next we have Parvin Estesami, which is the greatest Persian poetess. So she wrote Mast va Hoshar, which means the drunk and the sober, and she is admired by those involved in romantic poetry. Now, after talking about classical Persian poetry, let's go to modern Persian poetry, where we have prominent authors like Nima Yusij, who is considered father of modern Persian poetry. He introduces many techniques and forms to differentiate the modern from the old Sepid poetry. Next, we have Ahmad Shamlu. Ahmad Shamlu adopted Nima's methods and tried new techniques of modern poetry. He discovered the inner characteristics of poetry, and he recognized the role of prose and music hidden in the language. We also have Faru Pakok Zadiz. Among the first generation to embrace the new style of poetry is this man, and he also was the first Iranian who graphically articulate private sexual landscapes from a woman's perspective. She transcended her own literary role and experimented with acting, painting, and documentary filmmaking. Now, in Persian literature, we have the term called Hafiz or Hafez. If we use the dictionary, it will tell us that Hafiz or Hafez is a term used by Muslims for people who have completely memorized the Quran. Now, when we go to Persian literature, Al-Hafiz or Hafiz is one of the names of a god in Islam, meaning the ever-preserving guardian and all-watching protector. Hafiz or Hafiz is also the pen name of Quaha Shamsuddin Muhammad Hafiz-i Shirazi, a Persian poet who lauded the joys of love and wine but also targeted religious hypocrisy. His collected works are regarded as a pinnacle of Persian literature and are often found in the homes of people in the Persian-speaking world who learn his poems by heart and still use them as proverbs and sayings. Hafiz Hafez also has his life and poems have become the subject of much analysis, commentary, and interpretation, influencing post-14th century Persian writing more than any other author. Hafez is best known for his poems that can be described as antinomian, and with the medieval use of the term theosophical. The term theosophy in the 13th and 14th century was also used to indicate mystical work by authors only inspired by the holy books. Now here are some lists or some of the poems of the old Persian literature. We have poems such as All the Hemispheres, From the Large Jug Drink, I Have Learned So Much, Let Thought Become You, Beautiful Lover, School of Truth, Laughing at the World, Laughing at the Word Too, I Know the Way You Can Get, I've Said It Before and I'll Say It Again, Tired of Speaking Sweetly, and No More Leaving. Now let's highlight one of the stories of old Persian literature. We have 1001 Nights, which is a medieval folktale collection which tells the story of Scheherazade. In Persian, is pronounced as Sarzad, a Sassanid queen who must relate a series of stories to her malevolent husband, King Shahryar, to delay her execution. The stories are told over a period of 1001 nights, and every night she ends the story with a suspenseful situation, forcing the king to keep her alive for another day. The individual stories were created over several centuries by many people from a number of different lands. Mukadame-ye Shahnameh-ye Abu Mansuri is the oldest surviving work of Persian literary. It is written during the Samanid period and it deals with the myths and legends. And this is also the oldest example of the Persian prose. Now, we talked earlier about Mr. Hafiz or Hafiz writing several proverbs or sayings that are still being used in Iran at present. I have here three examples of those. First, we have the saying, thousands of friends are far too few, one enemy is too much. Second, the wise enemy is better than the ignorant friend. And lastly, the wise enemy lifts you up, the ignorant friend casts you down. Now, what is the influence of the Persian literature on the world literature itself? William Shakespeare referred to Iran as the land of the Sufi. Some of Persia's best-loved medieval poets were Sufis, and their poetry was and is widely read by Sufis from Morocco to Indonesia. Rumi, in particular, is renowned both as a poet and as the founder of a widespread Sufi order. The themes and styles of this devotional poetry have been widely imitated by many Sufi poets. Many notable texts in Persian mystic literature are not poems, yet highly read and regarded. Among those are Kimiyayi Sa'adat and Azrar al-Tawhid. Afghanistan and the Transoxiana can claim to be the birthplace of modern Persian. Most of the great patrons of Persian literature, such as Sultan Sanjar and the courts of the Samanids and Ghaznavids, were situated in this region, as were writers such as Radaki, Unsuri, and Ferdowski. As such, this rich literary heritage continues to survive well into the present in countries like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan. With the emergence of the Ghaznavids and their successors, such as the Ghurids, Timurids, and Mughal Empire, Persian culture and its literature gradually moved into the vast Indian subcontinent. Persian was the language of the nobility, literary circles, and the royal Mughal courts for hundreds of years. In modern times, Persian has been generally supplanted by Urdu, a heavily Persian-influenced dialect of Hindustani. Under the Mughal Empire of India during the 16th century, the official language of India became Persian. Only in 1832 did the British Army force the Indian subcontinent to begin conducting business in English. Persian poetry in fact flourished in these regions, while post-Safavid Iranian literature is stagnated. Dakota and other scholars of the 20th century, for example, largely based their works on the detailed lexicography produced in India using compilations such as Ghazi Khan, Badr Muhammad Dalavi's Adat al-Fudhala Ibrahim Gavamuddin, Farughi's Farhang-e Ibrahimi, and particularly Muhammad Padshah's Farhang-e Anandrag, famous South Asian poets and scholars such as Amir Khosrow Dehlavi, Mirza Ghalib, and Muhammad Iqbal of Lahore found many admirers in Iran itself. Now, the Persian literature was little known in the West before the 19th century. It became much better known following the publication of several translations from the works of late medieval Persian poets, and it inspired works by various Western poets and writers. Like, for example, in 1819, Goethe published his Ostlicher Divan, a collection of lyric poems inspired by a German translation of Hafiz. The German essayist and philosopher Nietzsche was the author of the book Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It refers to the ancient Persian prophet Zoroaster. We also have a selection from Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, which was published in 1832 by James Atkinson, a physician employed by the British East India Company. Another was a portion of this abridgment was later versified by the British poet Matthew Arnold in his 1853 Rustum and Sohrab. And finally, we have the American poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was another admirer of Persian poetry. He published several essays in 1876 that discuss Persian poetry, letters, and social aims from the person of Hafiz and Ghazal. Perhaps the most popular Persian poet of the 19th and early 20th century was Omar Khayyam, whose Rubaiyat was freely translated by Edward Fitzgerald in 1859. Khayyam is esteemed more as a scientist than a poet in his native Persia. But in Fitzgerald's rendering, he became one of the most quoted poets in English. Khayyam's line, "A loaf of bread, a jug of wine, and thou," is known to many who could not say who wrote it or where. The Persian poet and mystic Rumi, which is also known as Maulana in Iran, has attracted a large following in the late 20th and early 21st century. We also have Divan. It is a collection of poets, ghazals, and other verse arranged alphabetically according to rhymes. Now, the ghazal is either an ode or a lyric. It is a poetic form consisting of rhyming couplet and refrain. Poetic expression of both pain of loss or separation and the beauty of love. And usually this is written by Persian mystics and poets. He translated works by, among others, Farid al-Din Attar, Rumi, Ferdowsi, Omar Khayyam, Saadi, and Sanai. Influenced by the writings of the Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg, he was specially attracted to the religious or Sufi aspects of classical Persian poetry. More recently, Rumi, Hafiz, Fakhruddin, Iraqi, and Nizami Aruzi are available in translation by Ashk Dalin, a scholar in Iranian studies who has made Persian literature known to a wider audience. During the last century, numerous works of classical Persian literature have been translated into Italian by Alessandro Bausani. This was for the poems of Nizami, Rumi, Iqbal, and Khayyam. We also have another Carlo Sacconi, another Italian poet, who translated poems of Attar, Sanai, Hafiz, Naziri, Khusrau, Nizami, Ahmad Ghazali. Another Italian poet, Angelo Piemontese, translated poems of Amir Khusrau Delavi. Italian poet Pio Filippani Ronconi translated poems of Nasiri, Khusrau, and Saadi. Italian poet Riccardo Zipoli translated poems of K. Cos Bidil, Italian poet Maurizio Pistoso translated poems of Nizam al-Mulk, Italian poet Giorgio Versalin translated poems of Nizami Aruzzi. We also have the Italian Giovanni Maria d'Armi, who translated poems of Ubaid Sakani and Hafiz. We also have Sergio Foti, who translated poems of Surawardi, Rumi, and Jami. And finally, we have Rita Bargigli, who translated poems of Saadi, Faruqi, Manucheri, and Unsuri. So, a complete translation of Pierdosi's Shan Nama was made by Italo Pisi in the 19th century. Now, I'm highlighting one of Persian literature's mythology or mythological person, Farhad. So, Farhad is a famous character in Persian literature and Persian mythology. Now, the story of his love with Shirin is one of the most famous love stories in Persian culture. The most important work about him is Khosrow and Shirin by Persian poet Nizami Ganjavi. But this story was well known in Persian literature long before Nizami. Ferdowsi also narrates the story of Khosrow and Shirin, but in his version, Farhad only plays a minor part. The story of Farhad has Parthian origins. Some writers, such as the unknown writer of Mojmal al-Tawarik wal-Qisas, refer to Farhad as a Kayanian figure. But Ami is one of the first writers that refer to Farhad as a Sasanian figure. Story of Farhad. So Farhad is a sculptor who falls in love with Shirin, the princess of Persian Armenia. But Shirin is already in love with Khosrow Parviz, the king of Persia. Khosrow asks Farhad to carve a staircase in a mountain and tells him if he manages to do so, Khosrow will give up Shirin. Farhad tries hard day and night in the hope that Khosrow will let him marry Shirin. Finally, Farhad builds the staircase, but Khosrow has a messenger falsely inform Farhad that Shirin had died. So for this, Farhad believes this false and jumps into his death from the mountain. So such a tragic story. But for this report, this story will be the conclusion of my report. On the last page, the links of the websites that I have used in creating this report. So thank you very much.